March 21, 1987. 5,000 people are packed into Bally's casino in Las Vegas. The lights dim, the crowd erupts. Dean Martin walks onto that stage wearing a black tuxedo, and he looks every bit the legend everyone came to see. The band strikes up. His voice fills the room. Everything is perfect, except it isn't. Because in exactly 35 minutes, Dean Martin will do something he has never done in his entire career. He will walk off stage in the middle of a song, drop the microphone, and never perform again. And what happens in the next 48 hours will reveal a side of this man that nobody knew existed. But here's what you need to understand first. This isn't just a story about a canceled show. This is about what happens when the image you've spent 40 years building, the unshakable cool guy, the man who never lets anything bother him, collides with the one thing no image can protect you from, the loss of a child. Let me take you back, because to understand what happened that night, you need to know who Dean Paul Martin was. He wasn't just Dean Martin's son. He was Dean's entire world. Born November 17, 1951, Dean Paul, everyone called him Dino, grew up with a target on his back. Imagine being the son of one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. The pressure alone destroys most celebrity kids. But Dino, he thrived. Tennis champion in his youth, formed a successful pop-rock duo called Dino, Desi and Billy, with Desi Arnaz Jr. and Billy Hinchey, actual hit records. Appeared in films and television. Handsome, talented, charismatic. But here's the thing that made Dean Martin's chest swell with pride. His son became a captain in the California Air National Guard, flying F-4 Phantom fighter jets. Think about that for a second. The son of a Rat Pack legend, who could have coasted on his father's name forever, chose to serve his country, chose to strap himself into a fighter jet and fly missions over the mountains of California. Dean Paul Martin was everything his father hoped he would be. Talented, humble, brave, loved by everyone who knew him. Now Dean Martin built his entire career on being cool, unshakable, the guy with a drink in one hand, a cigarette in the other, who never let anything touch him. That was the brand. That was the image. But when it came to his son, that mask crumbled. Friends and family knew the truth. Dean Paul was Dean's favorite, not in a way that hurt his other children, but in a way that was undeniable. They weren't just father and son, they were best friends. Fast forward to early 1987. Dean Martin is 69 years old. His performing career is winding down. His health is declining. Decades of smoking are catching up with him. His lungs are starting to fail. His voice, once smooth as silk, now has this raspy quality that makes you wince when you hear it. But he's still got that presence, still got that charm, and he's still doing occasional shows in Vegas and Atlantic City because, let's be honest, what else is he going to do? Sit at home and count his money. March 21, 1987, Saturday night. Dean is scheduled to perform at Bally's Casino. The showroom is packed. 5,000 people paid good money to see the King of Cool do his thing. Dean arrives around 7 p.m., earlier than usual. His road manager, a guy named Eddie Marsh, notices something different about Dean that night. He seems lighter, almost playful. Eddie would later say, usually before a show, Dean was quiet, reserved, just going through the motions. But that night, he was cracking jokes with the crew, asking about their families. It was like the old Dean was back. What Eddie didn't know was that Dean had spoken to his son that morning. Dean Paul called from March Air Force Base in California. The conversation was brief, warm. Dean Paul told his father he loved him. Dean told his son he was proud of him. An ordinary conversation, the kind they'd had 100 times before. Neither of them knew it would be their last. 9 p.m. Dean Martin walks onto that stage to thunderous applause. The band starts playing. Dean launches into his opening number. The audience is electric, cheering, whistling, completely captivated. Dean moves through his set list with practiced ease. That's Amore. Ain't that a kick in the head? Memories are made of this. The crowd sings along. For those 90 minutes, it feels like the golden age of Las Vegas has returned. 9:35 p.m. Dean begins singing, Everybody Loves Somebody, his signature song, the one that knocked the Beatles off the #1 spot back in 1964. The audience sways. Couples hold each other. Dean's voice, raspy but still powerful, fills the room. And then something happens that changes everything. Eddie Marsh appears in the wings. Stage left. He's holding a phone. His face is ashen. He's trying to get Dean's attention without disrupting the performance. He waves. Then he waves more urgently. Dean notices mid-verse. Dean stops singing. The band, confused, keeps playing for a few more bars before trailing off. The audience thinks this is part of the show. They wait expectantly. Dean stares at Eddie. Everyone who knew Dean Martin would later say you could see something change in his face in that moment. Something fundamental breaking. Something's wrong, Dean says into the microphone. His voice isn't panicked. It's flat, empty. Excuse me, folks. He sets the microphone down on the piano and walks off stage. The audience applauds, thinking he's taking a break. The band starts playing fill music. But backstage, a nightmare is unfolding. Eddie Marsh is standing in the wings, tears streaming down his face. When Dean reaches him, Eddie can't speak. He just hands Dean the phone. On the other end is a colonel from the California Air National Guard. "Mr. Martin, I'm calling about your son, Captain Dean Paul Martin." Dean's hands start shaking. "What happened?" "Sir, I'm sorry to inform you that your son's aircraft crashed during a training exercise this afternoon at approximately 4 p.m. The plane went down in the San Bernardino Mountains. There were no survivors." Dean Martin drops the phone. He doesn't scream. He doesn't cry. He just stands there, frozen, staring at nothing. Eddie reaches out to steady him, but Dean pushes him away. He walks slowly, mechanically, toward his dressing room. The stage manager comes running. "Dean, what's happening? Should we cancel the show?" Dean turns and looks at him. "My son is dead." 4 words. That's all it takes to shatter everything. The stage manager immediately goes on stage and announces that due to an emergency, the show is canceled. Refunds will be issued. The audience, confused and concerned, files out. Most of them don't know what happened. They won't find out until the next morning when the news breaks. In his dressing room, Dean Martin sits on a couch, still wearing his tuxedo. Eddie stands by the door, unsure what to do. Dean isn't crying. He isn't speaking. He's just staring at his hands. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, Dean speaks. "He called me this morning. He said he loved me." Eddie nods, tears streaming down his face. "He did, Dean. He loved you very much." "He was flying," Dean says, his voice distant. "He loved flying. He said it made him feel free." Dean stands up suddenly. "I need to go home. I need to tell Jean." Jean Martin was Dean's ex-wife and Dean Paul's mother. They divorced in 1973, but they remained close, united by their love for their children. Eddie arranges for a car to take Dean to Jean's house in Beverly Hills. The drive is silent. Dean sits in the back seat, staring out the window at the lights of Las Vegas passing by. Eddie sits next to him, not knowing what to say. What do you say to a man who just lost his son? When they arrive at Jean's house, she's already standing in the doorway. Someone called her. She's crying, her face red and swollen. Dean gets out of the car and walks toward her. When he reaches her, he collapses into her arms, and for the first time, Dean Martin breaks down. He sobs, deep, wrenching sobs that come from a place of pain so profound that everyone who witnesses it will never forget it. Jean holds him, and they cry together for the son they lost. Here's where this story gets even more devastating. The next morning, March 22, 1987, the news is everywhere. Dean Paul Martin, son of Dean Martin, killed in plane crash. The media descends on the Martin family like vultures. Reporters camp outside their homes. Cameras flash. Microphones are shoved in their faces. The world wants to know how Dean Martin is handling the tragedy. But Dean isn't handling it. He's drowning in it. The details of the crash are devastating. Dean Paul had been flying an F-4 Phantom II on a routine training mission over the San Bernardino Mountains. Weather conditions were poor, heavy clouds, limited visibility. At approximately 4 p.m., his plane disappeared from radar. Search and rescue teams were deployed immediately, but the rugged terrain made it difficult to locate the wreckage. It took 3 days to find the crash site. When they did, it confirmed what everyone already knew. Dean Paul Martin and his weapons systems officer, Captain Ramon Ortiz, had not survived. The plane had slammed into a mountain at high speed. There was nothing left. Dean Martin attends the memorial service on March 26, 1987, at the Los Angeles National Cemetery. It's a military funeral with full honors. Hundreds of people attend: family, friends, fellow pilots, celebrities, fans. Dean sits in the front row wearing sunglasses to hide his tears. When the honor guard presents him with a folded American flag, Dean holds it against his chest and weeps openly. This is not the cool, unshakable Dean Martin the world knows. This is a father burying his son, and it's unbearable to watch. Frank Sinatra, Dean's closest friend and fellow Rat Pack member, delivers the eulogy. His voice shakes as he speaks about Dean Paul, about his bravery, his talent, his kindness. And then Frank looks directly at Dean and says, "Dino, I know no words can ease your pain, but please know that we all loved your boy, and we love you." After the funeral, Dean Martin disappears from public life. He cancels all upcoming performances. He stops taking phone calls. He rarely leaves his house. Friends who visit him say he's a shell of the man he used to be. He sits in his living room, drinking, staring at photos of Dean Paul, playing videos of him over and over again. Shirley MacLaine, one of Dean's closest friends, visits him a few weeks after the funeral. "I walked into his house, and it was like walking into a tomb," she later says. All the curtains were drawn, the lights were off. Dean was sitting in the dark, watching a video of Dean playing tennis when he was a kid. He looked at me and said, "I can't do this anymore, Shirley. I can't live in a world where my son doesn't exist." Dean's daughter, Dina Martin, tries desperately to pull her father out of his grief. She visits him every day, brings him food, tries to get him to go outside. But Dean is unreachable. "It was like he died with Dino," Dina says. "My father's body was still here, but his soul was gone." In the months and years that follow, Dean Martin's health deteriorates rapidly. He develops emphysema from decades of smoking. He loses weight. He stops caring about his appearance. The man who once was the epitome of cool now looks frail and broken. In 1988, Dean makes a brief attempt to return to performing. He agrees to do a reunion tour with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., billed as the ultimate event, but after just a few shows, Dean walks off the tour. He tells Frank, "I can't do it. Every time I'm on stage, I think about Dino. I think about how he should be here. I can't pretend to be happy anymore." Frank understands. He doesn't try to convince Dean to stay. He just hugs his friend and says, "I love you, pal." Dean Martin spends his final years in isolation. He watches old movies. He listens to music. He drinks, and he thinks about his son. Christmas morning, December 25, 1995, Dean Martin dies at his home in Beverly Hills. He's 78 years old. The official cause of death is acute respiratory failure, but everyone who knew him understands the truth. Dean Martin died of a broken heart. At Dean's funeral, Dean Martin stands at the podium and says, "My father never recovered from losing Dino. He tried, he really did, but the pain was too much. For 8 years, he carried that grief every single day. And now, finally, he's with his son again. I believe with all my heart that they're together now, and my father is finally at peace." The story of Dean Martin and Dean Paul is a tragedy that goes beyond fame and fortune. It's a reminder that grief doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're a legendary entertainer or an ordinary person. When you lose a child, the pain is the same. Dean Martin spent his entire career projecting an image of effortless cool. He made everything look easy: singing, acting, performing. But beneath that image was a man who loved deeply and hurt deeply. And when he lost his son, the world saw the real Dean Martin, not the performer, not the legend, just a father, broken by the loss of his child. There's a recording from that night, March 21st, 1987. It's not widely circulated, but it exists. You can hear Dean singing "Everybody Loves Somebody," his voice smooth and confident, and then you hear him stop. You hear the band trail off. You hear the confusion in the audience. And if you listen closely, you can hear the exact moment Dean Martin's life changed forever. That recording is haunting, not because of what it contains, but because of what it represents. It's the sound of a father's world ending, the sound of a man realizing that nothing, not fame, not fortune, not talent, can protect you from the worst pain imaginable. Dean Martin once said, "I'd give up everything I have to have my son back. All of it. The money, the fame, the career. I'd trade it all for one more day with Dino." But he never got that day. None of us do. And that's the cruelest truth of all.